Today is the deadline for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to formally respond to a group of MPs asking him to step down as their party leader. Now, 24 MPs, most of whom have stayed anonymous, gave Trudeau until today to make up his mind. But the Prime Minister has made it clear already he isn't going anywhere, whether when he left that meeting last Wednesday saying the party is strong or in the press conference the following day. It's unknown, though, what these dissenting MPs plan to do in response to Trudeau's response. Meanwhile, the Trudeau government facing another deadline tomorrow. The Bloc Québécois has threatened to trigger an election if two pieces of legislation aren't passed. One would increase old age security payments, the other bolstering supply management. Now, to help us look into the latest developments from Parliament Hill, we're joined live in studio by CTV political commentator Scott Reid. Scott, always great to have you here. Andrew. The first thing I want to be asking you is about the response that Trudeau's already given his MPs and what really they're expecting now. I heard Wayne Long on Question Period, and I know that he says that there should have been more of a, let's just say more of a conversation, or at least more of a response here. But can he not, doesn't he have to say whether or not he will step down, that things are good, everything's sunny ways?
Yeah, sure, he's going to say that, but this deadline is going to pass without a seismic event, all right? Questions been asked, questions been answered. The Prime Minister has no intention of leaving. And it sort of underlines, frankly, the sort of decentralized, somewhat disorganized nature of all this. This isn't a coup. It's like a traditional effort where, you know, one group of caucus members want to see a leader replaced with someone else. This is just a sort of an organic, natural, unstructured expression of frustration with the Prime Minister and desire to see him leave. So they set a deadline. The deadline's going to come and go. That's good for the Prime Minister. He can say, well, I stared him down. On the other hand, these people are still in his caucus. It's what I call an iceberg rebellion. 24 of them can be seen above the waterline, but beneath, there's maybe dozens more of his own caucus members, his own party members, who, if you wanted to ask them honestly, would tell you over a cup of coffee or a glass of beer, they'd just as soon the Prime Minister leave. And that problem will persist.
And I'm thinking a little bit about how this is all being quashed. You know, this is clearly not as cutthroat as it was during the Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien camps in that era of the Liberal Party. But do you think that, as you're talking about what's underneath the surface, do you think that ultimately there will be more of a groundswell if he seems weak going forward?
I think what you will see is a persistence in the Prime Minister's situation, which is wash away all this internal stuff. 22 points behind the Conservatives in the polls, losing and behind in every region, every demographic, behind with women voters, behind with young voters, behind with older voters. So that's the fundamental challenge. And with this much discontent, even within his own caucus, and that's what's triggering all of this. They're like, boss, we just don't think we can win with you. And we think you're actually a lightning rod for a lot of this disaffection and anger. So will he want to end his career by losing, and not just losing an election, but possibly losing in really catastrophic terms? And so that's the question that's going to persist. It isn't going to happen today at 5 p.m., according to a deadline, but it is the reality for the Liberal Party and for the Prime Minister for the next number of months. And it's going to be heavier and heavier for him to bear up under that.
I'm looking at the Angus Reid poll that came out today, and it seems like even amongst decided Liberals, those will always or usually always vote red. There's a little bit less of a consistency there, but those that don't want to vote Liberal, even they basically say, without a new leader, I'm not even going to bother to look.
Well, that's the implacable problem for the Prime Minister. I mean, his fundamental message is, I'm not fighting for this job. Okay, I heard you. Not gonna do it, man. Like, I'm not leaving, and you can't remove me, which is a critical factor. There is no mechanism to dislodge him, no vote that's to happen, and no tool by which they can pry him out of office. And so he's just going to persevere. But what the polls show, and this is a problem for the Prime Minister over time, is not just that he drags down the party, but that if he left, there is an opportunity for renewal. Now, I wouldn't bet you $5 that the government can get reelected, but it might be able to avoid a catastrophic, 1993-esque failure that faced the Conservatives. No one's really talking about that yet for the federal Liberals, but they're going to start talking about it with these polling numbers and with this kind of intransigence.
Yeah, it may feel more like Joe Clark after he lost than Mulroney, but it seems like the writing's on the wall now.
It's not going to feel like Joe Clark. It is going to be a big loss. It's going to be 2011 when they fell to third place. It's going to be 84 when they were reduced to 40 MPs. It could be 93 when the Conservative Party was blasted to smithereens. That's why these 24 MPs are speaking up, and that's why the Prime Minister has a permanent problem.
CTV political commentator Scott Reid, always appreciate your time and your insights.